We're going to look at the pressing issues of the day within our community, what our community groups are doing on the ground, and any other issues that we can fit into the next 30 minutes. My own name is John. I'm delighted to facilitate this discussion. I'm joined by a number of activists across the community. Ailsa Spindler from the Gay Project, Kate Moynihan from Link, Debbie O'Rourke from Chill Out Youth Project, Sarah Phillips from Tenai, and Pádraig Kerrigan, lecturer and researcher with UCD. And just before we kick off our discussion, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a brief introduction on themselves, and we'll kick off with Ailsa.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ailsa Spindler. As John's already said, I'm the coordinator of Gay Project. We're based in Cork, but we cover, well, certainly all of Munster, and we have activities beyond that too. So we look out for the interests of gay, bisexual, queer, trans men, and men who have sex with men. Personally, I've been an LGBTQI plus activist for more years than I'm prepared to reveal to the general public. I've been all sorts of different things, paid and unpaid, and all I would say is the fight goes on, and it's really good to have everybody engaging with us today.
Thanks, Ailsa. And Kate, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Kate Moynihan, and I'm the coordinator in Link. So we work with lesbian and bisexual women from all different parts of the country. We have outreach projects in Kerry and Waterford. And I suppose just to say, working within my own community is a total privilege for me.
Thanks, Kate. Debbie?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Debbie O'Rourke. I'm a community and youth worker. I work with Chill Out Youth Project, which is our LGBT project in Waterford and South Tipperary Community Youth Service. We're based in Waterford City, and then we have groups in Dungarvan and Clonmel as well. We work with 10 to 24-year-olds. I'm also a committee member with Pride of the Daisha, a relatively new pride on the scale of where some prides have come from. And we've had particular experience in Waterford, which I'll talk about. But like Kate said, working within my own community is something I've done for many, many years. To be able to walk that journey with young people as well is also a great privilege for me, and to make sure that they have spaces where their voices are centred and platformed, and where they can grow their confidence is probably my greatest achievement so far.
Thanks, Debbie. Cheers. Sarah?
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Sarah Phillips. I'm the chair of Transgender Equality Network Ireland. I've been in that chair now for 9 years, a bit too long probably. But TENI is the national trans organisation. We work across all aspects of life for trans people in Ireland. We provide support, education, and we advocate for our rights. We do a lot of work, especially around family support and healthcare, and working on a lot of the problems that we have within the healthcare system right now. I've been in the community for over 25, 30 years now, working in various different aspects of that. And I'm also currently on the board of the National Women's Council here in Ireland.
Thanks, Sarah. And last but not least, Pádraig.
Thanks very much, and it's a pleasure for me to be able to join you all today. So I am an assistant professor at UCD, where I research on new and emerging technologies in media and how they intersect with gender and sexual minorities, particularly examining the vulnerabilities that are created for gender and sexual minorities. So that is one strand of my research. The other strand is researching queer Irish history and queer Irish culture. And I've had the pleasure and the privilege to work alongside and research with much of the queer community here in Ireland, which is the focus of my recent book, LGBTQ Visibility, Media and Sexuality in Ireland. So that is essentially the work I do and the work I continue to do with the community.
Thanks, Pádraig. And just for ye, my own name is John Marr. I'm a local councillor on Cork City Council, and I'm a member of the LGBT plus community. Came out in 2017, and since then I've seen the benefit of the community groups and the supports. And politically, I've also seen the work that I can do to deliver full equality. So we'll kick off the discussion. Ailsa, I'll go to you first. Each year we see more and more organisations raise the pride flag. How can we support them to enhance their LGBT plus initiatives and their ERGs?
Okay, that's, I think, a very pertinent question at the moment because, of course, we're in the middle of Cork Pride. We've had Pride Week across Ireland earlier in the year and other smaller local prides going on, and that's fantastic. And it's really good that we get businesses and community partners, agencies, all the people saying, yes, let's put a pride flag up. However, I feel sometimes that there is a lot of rainbow washing, that people feel that that's all they have to do to show their LGBTQI plus credentials. And the real change has to come at a much deeper level, both within individual businesses, organisations, but also in society as a whole. I mean, some of you may already know that we've just seen a right-wing journalist posting defamatory statements online, calling the Queen's drag show that we arranged earlier in the week. They're calling them pedophiles. They're saying it's perversion and being exposed to children. It's just awful that sort of thing goes on. Now, a flag, of course, is a very visible symbol, but we really need to see HR departments taking the whole issue a bit more seriously, having proper training in terms of how to work with LGBTQI plus colleagues in the workplace, be a good ally, and just generally accept that, to use a pertinent but perhaps rather old phrase, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. You know, I mean, we're not going away in spite of what some of these nasty right-wing people would like us to do, and we need to ensure that the rights that we fought for and will continue to fight for, because we haven't got everything that we should have, that those rights are protected in the workplace and in society as a whole.
Thanks, Ailsa. Appreciate that. Debbie, if I can come to you. Recently we saw the burning of the pride flag during Waterford Pride. Have we really come as far as we've thought?
In a word, I think the answer has to be no. I know there was huge shock in the kind of general community in Waterford and huge support in the days that followed the burning of the flag, but that was Waterford. We've seen similar things in Carlow. I was looking last night at the young people from Cork's mural that was vandalised and horrible graffiti being shown on it. We can see this happening. This is not... what happened in Waterford wasn't a unique event. This is something that has happened this year in a way that we haven't seen in a while. I think we need to be really cautious. The impact of what happened was huge on the LGBT community personally. The impact on ourselves and the committee was massive as well. I felt that. And I think we really need to think about whose responsibility it is to make sure that these things can't happen. And it's not any one person's responsibility, but it's definitely not only the community, up to the community to fight back against events like this. It's really important that we stay visible and that the fear doesn't move us backwards in terms of being able to show proudly who we are to the world. But I think wider society, and we certainly saw in Waterford, more people need to be more open about their support of us as an ally or wherever their position is. It's not enough for us to exist proudly anymore. I think it's really important that other people take responsibility for their part in change in society and making sure that things like burning flags and the disgust that we feel seeing things like that happen, we need to make sure that the action that follows that is that will not be tolerated in general society. I was surprised when it happened, but not necessarily shocked. And I think I'm sure colleagues here will also, agree that within the community and working with the community, homophobia and transphobia and openness to express that happens. I work with young people on a weekly basis who are living with things like that all the time. So I wasn't like overly shocked. This is something that exists in society. I think the unintended positive of it happening is that other people are waking up to the fact, people who don't hear it all the time are waking up to the fact that attitudes and values like that are still somewhere in our society, and we all need to take responsibility to make sure that it's not going to be tolerated.
Thanks, Debbie. Kate, if I can jump over to you. In the last week, we've seen various crimes against Pride Week initiatives. What impact does that have on our community?
Thanks, John. It has a huge impact on the community. So we've seen several incidents happening in Cork in the past week. You've heard Ailsa talk about the journalist and their comments on the event the other night. But we in Link, we've had a project out in Fitzgerald Park. So it's the Link Drama Group have put on a performance called Queer Code. So how it's being put on this year is through exhibits in Fitzgerald Park, which have a QR code on them, and people can go to the park and scan the code and watch the performance. So these have been removed, destroyed, stolen, I think three times at the beginning of the week. Now they've been reprinted each time, and they will go up every time they're taken down. They will be put up again. But I think the impact of that on those people who've performed, first off, because they've made themselves really visible, really vulnerable by their performances. They're speaking very much about their lives and their own experiences. And then the message it puts out to our community that we're still not safe. And I think that's probably one of the biggest impacts is, do we need to be in the closet? Do we need to go back in the closet to be safe? And my message will always be no, we need to be visible and be out there. And I suppose the other project then, and Debbie has referred to it, is the youth project. Up Cork Youth Group have a mural on O'Sullivan's Quay, and that's been vandalised again with really nasty comments. And so that's our young people, again, who are working on these projects, getting that negative message when at a time when we had hoped we had moved so far away from those type of comments in Ireland. And I suppose just one other thing then in relation to that as well, it's like I've had people contact me this week. I had an email from a woman the other day talking about how she was walking from the wonderful event that was the launch of Cork Pride. And some young guys, group of them together, again making nasty homophobic comments to her. A woman walking on her own, really scary, and that can really drive people, I suppose, back home, back into the closet, and that's not good for us.
Thanks, Kate. And I suppose just when you've shared your experiences there, it's important that when we talk about the young people, I just have the pleasure of working with some scouts, and just the last week we were in summer camp, and the pride towel was in a number of the young people's bags. I don't know what their situation is, but they were proud to have the flag. The whole was out, and it created a conversation, and I think that's what we're hitting at, is that that positivity of a flag or of a symbol. And again, for those who had the pleasure of being at the parade last week, we saw the colour, the enthusiasm, the love in the various towns, and I think that's what we need to promote, and I think that will overcome any negative words, and I think that's how we fight back. Sarah, if I can come to you now. We've seen a sustained negative rhetoric from gender critical voices in both social media and mainstream media. How does that affect the trans community?
Yeah, John, thank you. I mean, it's very difficult to see your very existence being, and I use this word very carefully, debated in social media and media every single day. It makes life much more difficult for young people, especially to come out to actually navigate that conversation about what it means to be trans. But we're also seeing that a knock-on effect from those conversations. And again, I don't like these words like conversation, discussion, debate, because it's other people talking about us, not about we're not in this discussion as such. But I do believe that, you know, it's now filtering into everyday life. We've been seeing experiencing of trans people, specifically trans women, being attacked on the streets of Dublin, for instance, in the last 6-7 months. We've had, you know, a lot of people receiving death threats through their DMs on Twitter. You know, and I know that is a cesspit of you know, whatever you want to call it. It's terrible. But the impact on the trans community's mental health is colossal. I think it's important to realize that the direction of a lot of these negative attacks focus on a fear that, you know, especially around trans women, for instance, but they're the same old tropes that we've heard before, you know, men and women's spaces, mind the children, these sort of things. And these, we've heard these stories in the wider LGBT community in the past. It is very much now focused on the trans community in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, it's also very hard for trans community not to stand up and try and engage and fight back. And yet when you do, it provides more oxygen for it. It also provides a situation where they is exactly what your these gender critical voices are looking for. What they're trying to do is provoke you. They're trying to then publicize the way you react, and then perpetrate a constant you know, process where this debate or their so-called debate will happen. But it is having a huge effect on our community. It is conversation within our support groups day in, day out. And really what the effect of how we deal with it is really going to be about, like I think what both Ailsa and Kate just said there a moment ago, about building that allyship around making sure that we are all staying together, keeping that positive visibility that we've gained over the last 10 years and keeping going and trying to build more coalitions and more allies and more conversations like this, so that we make sure that people are aware that we have to fight against it in some shape or form.
Thanks, Sarah. And Pádraig, can you just tell us a little about the research of the LGBT plus visibility?
Absolutely, and my research on LGBTQ visibility speaks to a lot of what the panel is actually discussing today. And my research has been really informed and interested in examining why has visibility always been such a crucial aspect of queer civil rights movements. You know, to be seen, to be heard is so crucial for these movements. So visibility takes on a role that is, it's social, it's political, it's cultural, and it's been used and utilized by queer civil rights movements as a particular political tool, because to ascertain or obtain visibility is a means by which they can achieve or transmit a particular message to communicate that we exist, we are here, we are valued, and we deserve to be here. So that's one thing. Visibility also is really crucial for queer communities because it goes to demonstrate that there are other queer people out there. And how can we tell people that there are other queer people out there without that power of visibility, without the power of media or being able to get onto some media system, or having a mural in Cork, the one that Ailsa and Debbie have spoken, and Kate have spoken to, the mural that was defecated. But these are really important symbols of visibility that demonstrate how it is crucial to indexically show that there is a community there for people who may be struggling. So while visibility may be political in that it can help to achieve liberation, it can help to progress the movement, it can help to show that a movement and a community exists, what the conversations here today are showing, and what we're seeing recently within, I suppose, far-right responses that is manifested through gender critical conversations, which I kind of even hate to use the term, but this has become the taxonomical positioning, flagging that has become the norm in the conversations. But visibility is a double-edged sword, and visibility has a particular power. And when we want to become visible, we become subjected to particular power dynamics. Oftentimes, this can have really problematic repercussions, such as the disciplinary effects of the deprecation of the QR codes for the Link Drama Group, or the mural and whatnot. But that shouldn't stop us from trying to achieve visibility. And my research demonstrates the perseverance of this visibility and the power of that for the community to maintain a space that's often somewhat threatening to broader society. Well, it's really important that we maintain that for especially our queer youths coming through the ranks.
Thanks, Pádraig. Elsa, we're going to jump back to you now. You spoke earlier about supporting business. What about education and training? Is there enough engagement between corporations and not-for-profits?
Well, of course, we'd like to see more cooperation. I'm sure I speak for all of the NGOs when I say we often do get contacted by businesses that want training. I think there are some issues around that. One, I would say, is that often the training they're looking for is rather superficial. So we find that actually you need more than one session really to address a lot of the issues that face people in the workplace when they come across LGBTQI plus issues. And I think another thing, and this is something we within the sector need to sort out for ourselves, is there is no proper accreditation of training. I would like to see all Irish NGOs dealing with these issues to have proper accredited trainers so that the standard of training was at a very high level. It's very frustrating when some of our service users go to, for example, counsellors or therapists or their own HR departments or something, and they come back to us and say, rather than getting support, they've had to spend half their time explaining the issues. Because I think a lot of people oversimplify the issues. They think it's about how you come out. Well, some of us feel that you almost have to come out every day, for example. You have to come out every time, not just in the workplace with your colleagues, but every time you face a customer. Every time, if you're trans, you answer the phone, you can get all sorts of stuff. And I could go on, but all I'm saying is that we need to have an acceptance within the business world that this is a complex and important issue. Don't just listen to a conference like this once a year, but engage with us as experts, because we are experts. We have trained people, but we have lived experience. And those are things that you need to be aware of when you're planning your policies and your strategies to help and support LGBTQI plus staff and also customers.
Thanks, Ailsa. And Debbie, if I can come to you, we hear of a lot of people going back into the closet when they enter the workforce. How can workplaces support our younger LGBT plus community and to be authentic in themselves in the workplace?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important question. And young people, I work with young people, like they talk about like nerves about starting work is a really, like that's a thing we all go through when we're starting into the workforce and trying to look at where our place is and what we want to do in terms of career. And they're concerned about what they have to wear and all of that. But for LGBT young people, they also have another layer of thinking about if they'll be accepted, how will the conversations happen. I'm thinking, actually, I've just thought of a young man a young gay man I work with who recently started work, and he's really struggling with conversations that are happening in his workplace about the LGBT community, because he hasn't come out yet in work. He's out in his family and his community. He before he started work was very confident in that, and I can see his the impact on his confidence of starting work in a workplace where there's conversations happening, at lunchroom tables, on working lines where people are working beside each other. And it's very insidious. Like it's the things like how the word gay is used. It's the jokes that are made, and it's really having an impact on him. And I think companies and organisations really need to think about a day in the life of one of their employees. What would it mean for LGBT employees to work there? What happens? Do they ever see themselves? Like, we're talking a lot about visibility, and the status quo is that it's an exception in June that a rainbow flag goes up. It can't be an exception. We can't always have to be fighting to make ourselves visible. And talking about coming out all the time, like, this young man is going to have to come out to change some of the conversations that are happening, or approach his employer, and he's in no position at all to approach his employer to raise some of the issues or experiences that he's having. So you have to think about, like, how would an LGBT employee know that they're safe? Safety has been mentioned, and that's people's primary concern often, starting in a new workplace or a college or a different environment. Are they going to be safe there is the first thing. Going back into the closet might be around protecting safety until they know they're in a safe place. If they start out and they're hearing jeers about who they are, and they're hearing negativity about the LGBT community, then they know that they're not safe, so they might not go any further with sharing who they fully are in the workplace. The other thing about authenticity is, like, being able to be themselves as they are, and not having to conform to stereotypes, because they might be accepted to a certain level, but then if they're not presenting in the way that's an acceptable way to be queer at the moment in Irish society, then they've got another challenge, and I think about intersectionality, where for Black queer young people or disabled queer young people, the young people I work with who live with direct vision, who are part of the community, they might have 5 different identities to consider when they're starting employment. And I think it's really important that organisations and companies think about, like what I was saying, what would a day in the life be like for a young LGBT person coming into work? Do they see themselves represented? Is the community talked about or referenced in any way? Are they safe? Are the conversations that happen in their workplace safe? Are they celebrated? Are they promoted? And is that sustained outside of 1 month or one initiative? Like, young people would talk about, particularly, I suppose, school experience and experiences in workplaces where there's a focus for a day maybe or a week, and they get great joy, and that really matters to see themselves represented, but then it might disappear totally for the rest of the time they spend in that place, and that's kind of disjointed. It needs to be sustained. So if you have a certain budget, and that's the budget you have to spend on this, look at how you can sustain it over the year, or have like an extra bit of focus maybe in June or whenever Pride Month happens in your county. But sustainability, visibility and safety would be the 3 things, and just think about what a day in the life would be like for an LGBT young person in your workplace, and just be ahead of it. Don't wait for them to have to raise it.
Okay, Debbie, thanks a million, and we appreciate that. Pádraig, if I can jump over to you. You mentioned in an article on the Pride magazine that Cork has always been to the forefront in inciting change and ensuring more representation. And can you just tell us more about how we can build on that experience to strengthen the visibility of the LGBT plus community and in the workplace?
Absolutely, John, and it kind of speaks to what Debbie has just said, and it's that word, sustainability. And while it's really great that we're seeing, diversity and inclusion measures with Pride happening every June, it's simply not good enough. And what we need to happen and what we need to do is create a sustainable diversity work culture within organizations. So I recently did a project where we were focusing on media work specifically, and how media employers and broadcasters and writers' rooms and script writers could help improve recruiting talent from diverse communities, particularly the LGBTQ community. And what the findings from that research actually demonstrated was that these people didn't necessarily know where to go and recruit these young queers. And there are plenty of young queers who are talented and are qualified in media work and have developed media portfolios, but they just don't have connections there. So what needs to happen is that pipelines of talent need to be created within organizations to bring in this new diverse talent. And what this creates is what's referred to as productive diversity, where the more of a diverse workforce that you actually have, you have it populated with more diverse ideas, a diverse culture, diverse viewpoints, and queer perspectives that is different to the status quo of the organization. So that's one way in which visibility could be strengthened within the workforce. It's through generating this kind of sustainable pipeline of talent. Also, and this kind of speaks to a point that Sarah referenced earlier, it's to actually have people who are affected by the conversations in the room. And when there's decision-making processes happening, that you harness the queer people that you have in your organization and actually bring them into the decision-making process and bring them as part of that process, because there's nothing worse than having the conversations happening about you at a higher level in an organization that will ultimately trickle down and affect you. So bring in your LGBTQ employees into those conversations and actually have them in the room. And then the final point I would say in terms of how we can strengthen visibility is to actually recognize the intersectionality of our community, and that while we may be queer, gay, lesbian, trans, that we're also many other things, and there's many permutations to diversity. And what we need in the workplace is for our employers to actually, and organizations to understand diversity, what I refer to as diversity literacy, particularly as it comes to the queer community, and that they actually have an understanding of this, because they're all working from different kinds of pipelines, different kinds of manuscripts. And I think we need to improve diversity literacy within the workplace before we see really, really good, sustainable diversity amongst the workforce and in terms of visibility as well. So that's kind of what I would have to say about that, John.
Thanks, Pádraig. And unfortunately, guys, the clock is ticking against us, but I'm going to get Sarah and Kate in, and you about have a minute and a half each, okay? So I'll start with Sarah. Are there examples of best practices of what organisations are doing to support trans staff members?
Yeah, quickly, there are a number of them. I would highlight Dublin Bus specifically. They've been out there at the forefront of trying to ensure that they've employment policies, especially around trans inclusion in the workplace, and I'll focus on that specifically if that's okay. There are other ones coming on board, or CSI, Grant Thornton, Central Bank, Google. There are a few more, but they're few and far between. I think, but when companies are looking at this, you have to consider that you're not just writing an LGBT plus policy that is for inclusion in the workplace. You need to look specifically at trans inclusion also, and also take the steps to ensure that trans people know that the workplace is a welcoming place to be employed in, that you are welcome to apply for a job, and also that you will look at all of the various aspects of that person's inclusion rather than just being out in the workplace. That's a whole other conversation that could take up the hour, but I'll leave it at that for today.
Thank you, Sarah. And Kate, finally to yourself, can you tell us about the new Workling project that you're launching?
Okay, thanks, John. To speak very quickly about
no
it.
Pressure.
So this is a project, Workling. So it's been funded by Rethink Ireland, the Equality Fund. And so it's aimed at lesbian, bisexual women and employers. So we're looking at addressing some of the intersectionalities that that the other speakers have been talking about this morning as well, but also the impact that homophobia, both external and internal, has had on our community, and how that may hinder our educational development and career paths. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is rolling out training. We often find that our when we deliver a lot of training, and it often just goes to senior staff, whereas we hear that it's on the floor that people hear the jokes and the comments and the prejudice. So we're looking at rolling out our training further and engaging with employers, and I suppose also it's like for smaller companies, because we're aware that a lot of the big companies who've been involved here in this conference this morning have a lot of policies in place, whereas smaller companies, businesses don't. So we're looking to try and bring our training to those organisations. So it's like, you know, a two-pronged approach, really, working with the community and then working with employers as well. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks a million. And unfortunately, that is the end of our discussion. I'd like to thank Elsa, Kate, Debbie, Sarah and Pádraig, and just wish everybody a happy Pride. Thanks a million.